is the Rockie Road Podcast.
Larry Walker, make it three! Wow!
Brought to you by rockspile.com.
Swung on and bounced on one hop off the glove of Arnado. From his knees, throws to first and got him.
Blackmon to third. Throw coming to the plate is out of time. And inside the park home run for Charlie Blackmon.
And lifted in the shallow left. Diving grab made by Trevor Story.
But high and deep right field. Get up and get out. Captain's done it. The Rockies win it.
Melanson's pitch.
Drive to left field. Going back is Slater. It's gone.
Now, here's your host, Jake Shapiro.
Albert Almora Jr. 2 for 4 on the night. Singled in the second, singled in the seventh. Another right-handed batter. Oberg's pitch, swing and a foul to the screen. Everybody's up here in Chicago, but they are quiet. They are fearful. Could this possibly happen on their field 2 days in a row? The 0-1, swing and a miss. And the Rockies are down to a final strike to move on. Almora mad at himself. He might have chased a pitch out of the zone. Oberg calmly looks in, gets his sign from Tony Wolters. The 0-2 pitch, swing and a miss, he got him! Scott Oberg strikes out the side. The Rockies are moving on. A madhouse on the mound and now bouncing around in the grass out towards second. What a game for the Rockies. Everybody had a hand in this one. And they are moving on. Final score from Chicago. Just after midnight, the clock has struck 12 on the Chicago Cubs. In 13 innings, the Rockies 2, Chicago 1.
Well, I've been waiting to use that song for a while. Rockies Radio Network, KOA, Jack Corrigan, Jerry Schimmel on the call. Your Colorado Rockies are going to the NLDS for the first time since 2009. No haze there. Are you kidding me with that ball game? Take a deep breath. It's over. You made it through it. You didn't think you were going to make it through it. I forgot my name, where I'm from, how old I am. I tweeted it. I think I aged a few years during that ball game. And I'm supposed to be emotionless about this. How could you not be? How could you not love baseball on a night like this? I have so much to get to. And I'm going to do a full recap show tonight of this game because it deserves it. And probably go long. Tomorrow, I'll get you the playoff roster stuff for Milwaukee, what they're going to do in Milwaukee. But this is, in itself, deserving of just its own thing. What is this? This is Rockie Road. I know this is going to be one of the most listened to podcasts in the history of the show. Welcome in. This is a show that recaps every single Rockies game as quickly as I get audio from the players. You get to hear inside the clubhouse the players' reaction, and it's filled with champagne. And my guy Kevin Henry's in Chicago getting audio for this show. And it's some good audio. You already heard the KOA call. I'm Jake Shapiro. You can follow me on Twitter at Shapalicious. Email the show Rockie Road Podcast at gmail.com. Colorado baseball. Let me just start here. Because, I think there's a lot of personal stuff. And those of you who know me know why involved in this ball game. Chicago, Colorado thing. Grew up in Chicago, moved to Colorado. Have heavy ties to both teams, working with one. Grew up rooting for the other. But I want to start here. The most emotional moment I had in the game as someone that's supposed to be unbiased having this game is when I saw Kyle Freeland, a Colorado kid, a Denver native, step in there on the hill against Colorado kid, Faith Christian alum, David Bodie. It was so cool to see that. I mean, I've known both of them for a long time. David closer than I'd known Kyle, but you know why that exists? Why Dave Bodie is on that field and why Kyle Freeland is on that field? Dave Bodie was born the same day as the Colorado Rockies. Kyle Freeland was born in the same year. Without Rockies baseball, that doesn't exist. And I start the show here to say that moments like this are because the Rockies exist. It has an actual personal, far-reaching effect. When you have a night of baseball like this, where your entire city is tuned in, the entire state is behind you, and the country watches, it draws new people into the game. And somewhere at home, some little kid, like Kyle Freeland probably did, in 2007 when he was in high school already, or middle school, he would have been in middle school, and his eyes were bug-eyed. And he was going, "What is this, Mom? I want to do this. I want to be that guy." And that exists with Kyle Freeland and Dave Bodie because the Rockies exist. So if you just thought this was a regular old ball game, you're wrong on many fronts. And I said this yesterday on the show. The Rockies needed today's win. I thought it was going to be one of the most important games in franchise history. Obviously, it's a do-or-die game. But you needed to have a home playoff game in this run. I mean, the Rockies were Javi Baez 90 feet away, really, 120 feet away, whatever it was, from having a 3-year window and not having a single NLDS game or a single home playoff game in their first 2 years. This is a game changer. Tonight was a game changer for the franchise as a whole. Finally back in the NLDS after 9 years. And to do it the way they did it with their guys. Make as much noise as you want, as we have on this podcast, about Tony Wolters, Ian Desmond, guys that have been frustrating to watch, and certainly was frustrating at times. The Rockies going 1 for 18 after the 12th inning, and then things changed in the 13th with runners on base in the game. And the one hit came in the first inning. The Rockies didn't score a run for 5 hours in a baseball game. How many times can you say that about a team that wins a baseball game? They didn't score a run for 5 hours and won. But they did it with the Denver kid who has been absolutely incredible on 3 days rest, who was absolutely incredible. They did it with Wade Davis, their maligned closer at times, who Bud Black has never lost faith in. They did it with Scott Oberg, the guy that 3 years ago you wanted DFA'd off a 68-win team. And they did it with a converted second baseman to a catcher who hits under 200. It's baseball. Anything can happen in one game. And the Javi Baez's of the world, Anthony Rizzo's of the world, the guys with the supreme talent, yes, do they have a better shot of doing something incredible? Yes, but anything can happen in one game. The Cubs were obviously superiorly talented in that game. Hell, the Rockies didn't even do everything right. That David Dahl drop ball was atrocious. But you know what? Kyle Freeland locked it down, as he has all year. Granted, that was called a hit, but Kyle Freeland has not allowed an unearned run this year. He has left guys on base more than anyone said for 3 pitchers in baseball, because this dude pitches with more balls and more grit than anyone in baseball, and it's hard to explain it without going with the cliche white guy terms. It really is. He's just more determined than anybody else. And that's the dude a team can rally behind. I talked about it on the show a bunch of times this week. You better go get yourself a Kyle Freeland jersey. I really don't know how you don't have a Kyle Freeland jersey at this point if you are a Denver guy and like the Rockies. Like I always say, he's one of us. I was at a brunch the other day with a friend of a friend of his girlfriend's. With his girlfriend, he only has one. She's a really good person too, and she loves Denver. And their dogs love Denver. He's one of the guys you can run up to at Blake Street Tavern, who sponsors the show, and say, hey, how are the trails looking at Vail this weekend? It brings it back home. He never wanted to leave Denver, and he won't ever have to if he keeps pitching like this. But what a damn baseball game. There's a reason baseball has never seen a sudden death game go that long, and that's because it was insane. Neither the Cubs or Rockies could score, and I've watched a lot of the Cubs this year, and they've had a lot of the same problems that the Rockies have had. It's been Javi Baez and a bunch of dudes, just like how it's Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, and a bunch of dudes a lot of the time. Their pitching wasn't as good. You got into their bullpen, and you won it that way. They had to use 3 starters. You just beat goddamn John Lester, Cole Hamels, and Kyle Hendricks. 3 guys. 2 of them have won a Cy Young. 1 of them finished second place for a Cy Young with Kyle Freeland. Second-year left-hander out of Denver, Colorado that nobody has really ever heard of. They beat John Lester, Cole Hamels, and Kyle Hendricks that way. That doesn't happen. I've said it a while, but there's something magical about these Rockies, and they've won 10 of their last 12 now to get to the NLDS. And Tony Wolters, the guy who all of you wanted to bend over your knee and break like a bat yesterday, is the hero. This sport, it's romantic. You'll get your chance. You get your payback. I mean, that Drew Butera catcher's interference to load the bases. There was time and time again where the Cubs should have won this game. They should have. They flat should have. They got every break. The umps were even giving them breaks. And I'm not normally the ump guy, but if we're being honest, the strike zone was a little bit lenient towards Chicago. The whole broadcast was Cubs friendly, so it felt like it was all Cubs. But the little old Denver Nine wearing their purple uniforms, they're showing the ESPN highlights right now, and they just skipped the Rockies run to the Cubs run. You saw it all night. Trevor Story makes the catch of the night. I mean, you had the Rockies step up with their backs against the wall time and time again. And that's the ball club we have seen all season, and it's the ball club that you guys have grown to love. And it makes sense. Because even when they lose, they have not given up. You saw that yesterday when they had the 2 back-to-back home runs from Trevor Story and Nolan Arenado late in the game when it didn't really matter. But they didn't give up. And they didn't give up today, despite being in 3 different time zones, in 3 cities, in 3 days, and playing 13 innings. They did not give up. Their offense had to be as frustrating as possible. Their pitchers had to have been frustrated with that. Adam Ottavino has been one of the best relievers in baseball, had his hiccup. It was a frustrating game, and the Cubs, who have all the postseason experience in the world, couldn't find a way to break out of their frustration before the Rockies, who combined have like 5 guys who have ever played more than one postseason game. You know what that is? And I know a lot of people were frustrated with Bud Black this game because of some of the decisions made, Pat Valaika pinch hitting, frustrated with the roster, frustrated with, taking guys in and out of the bullpen. But you know what that is? That's good managing, that's good coaching, that's putting your guys in the right spots. And it paid off. And all that matters is not that it paid off in 9 innings, but it paid off before it paid off for the other guys. Rockies didn't need to beat the Cubs in 9 innings today. They just needed to beat them before the Cubs beat them, if that makes sense. All right, here's Bud Black as courtesy of Rox Pile's editor, Kevin Henry. I'll have stuff coming to Rox Pile written in the next little bit. I mean, it's going to be crazy for me. All right, here's Buddy.
Brother. Yeah, he really is. God, that feels good. God, that feels good. He's like everybody's little brother, right?
Yeah,
and they take care of him. So when your little brother does something good, you know, they're proud of us. It's awesome.
What's it like when you manage your ass off and then you have to let it go at some point, though, when it goes so late in the 13th inning? I mean, there are only so many things you can do.
Well, yeah, but at that time, you just got to keep, I'm talking with Red, Frosty, Stu, Tony, Giddy, all of them. I'm talking about, the things that we can do still, even though we have a few players left. At the end, you sort of run out of options, right? And you think about certain scenarios, but you just keep coaching. You just keep coaching and teaching.
Thanks, bud.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Those little old Rockies in their purple-clad uniforms beat the 2016 World Champs on their home field. Did you have the Cubs out at this point in October? The 95-win Cubs? Because their season's over. But the Colorado Rockies, they go on. I tweeted this, but, I mean, you must have had just an amazing imagination 2 weeks ago to say that the Rockies were going to be in the playoffs and do it this way. But Rocktober is where the imaginary becomes legendary. And for one guy in particular, Kyle Freeland, who pitched one of the best games under the circumstances in Rockies history, with the clutchness of it. He had a game score of 76, 6 2/3, 4 hits, a walk, and 6 strikeouts, just putting the Cubs bat at bay all game. Legendary isn't enough anymore. And I said on Twitter earlier today that you can put him in the conversation for greatest Colorado athletes of all time. And I'm not kidding. And I'm not gotten ahead of myself. You can put him right there with the Chauncey Billups, the great skiers, the Whizzer White. I always do that. And he's the best CU guy. And Supreme Court Justice. But you can put Kyle there. Because Kyle just had the greatest single season in Rockies history. He's from here. He's a legend around here. And what he did today was what legends do. At a certain point, we're just going to expect Kyle Freeland to do this. Like how the Cubs expected John Lester to do that. Because John Lester did do that. But Kyle Freeland did John Lester the way John Lester does John Lester better than John Lester. And I know there's been a lot of discussions about, hey, let's get Todd Helton a statue at Coors Field. The way this is going, Kyle Freeland might get a statue before Todd Helton. It doesn't get any better. The stories in sports do not get any better than kid who loves the team, who's a good person in the community, who's a nice guy, who loves everything about the community, plays for that community with their name on his chest, and is the best at what he does for that community. It just does not get better than that. That's the sports story we all love. That's the sports story we all dream of having. If you're from Minnesota, like Joe Mauer, you dream of growing up and playing for the Twins and being the best Twins player ever and having the clutchest moments. If you're in Chicago, want to be a Bull, you dream about being Derrick Rose, the way Derrick Rose was. Kyle Freeland is right there. And he's right here on the show.
And that's about peak for the entire year. Were you just feeling it tonight? Everything?
Yeah. Once I started warming up, adrenaline took over. My arm felt really good. I knew that I had to keep my emotions and my adrenaline and everything in check as much as I could. Hard in this environment, especially at Wrigley Field, packed house, with the history of the Cubs and how these fans live and die by every single pitch. Just did everything I could to keep them in check. Wasn't trying to throw hard. Was just trying to make my pitches and execute.
Sometimes that's one of the hardest things. When you've got the adrenaline rushing, you got to find a way to channel it, and you were able to.
Yeah.
Did I read that right?
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it goes to my breathing routine out on the mound, making sure I'm getting good breaths in, taking my breaths when I need them, and backing off the mound when I need to, and just making sure my emotions are in check and my adrenaline is at a spot where I know it's not going to take over my control.
Well, I tell you what, you did Colorado proud, huh?
Yeah, I'm extremely excited for it.
I know you are. Congrats.
Did you hear them chanting Freeland, trying to rattle?
Oh, that was funny.
Okay, thanks.
Another great story on the Rockies is Scott Oberg. Mentioned it in passing before, but this dude was a dude you did not feel confident having the ball in the 5th inning with nobody on when your team was winning 68 games a year. And yet, the stuff was always there. He was always throwing 98. It was just right down the middle, and it was flat. And that's the dude who comes in at the end of the game, inning and a third, picked up the win, but essentially got the save as well. On no day's rest, pitched yesterday in LA too, and was lights out. I mean, you'll probably not remember this because the Tony Wolters hit was great, but Scott Oberg struck out 4 guys in a row to end the game. Scott Oberg, who literally could not walk at one point in his college baseball career at UConn because he had a debilitating medical condition. And when that got figured out, he came back and started practicing again, and 2 weeks after that happened, he blew out his elbow, still got drafted by the Rockies, then he blew out his shoulder, then he wasn't good, then the Rockies lost faith in him, but they still gave him a couple chances because nobody else was really that good. And he finally figured it out. That's the dude who got the ball and who was on the mound when the Rockies dogpiled. That's a story you root for. And Scotty's a good guy, too. Here's Scott Oberg from the bowels of Wrigley Field.
Yeah, it was awesome. The way we played today, I think we can take this and continue to keep going and continue to win more ball games.
The resiliency of this team, you guys talked about it's really pretty remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. I mean, we've had ups and downs throughout the season. We've had, the bullpen be up and down. We've had the hitters be up and down. The starters have been really consistent throughout the whole year. And then to be able to come into a stadium like this type of atmosphere.
Oh, unbelievable, right?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, you couldn't ask for anything better.
Wow.
So loud.
Yeah.
And, we just fought tooth and nail until every last out, every last pitch. So it was, you can't really say enough about the way we went out and fought.
You got a W.
I got a W.
And man, congrats. It's been fun watching you.
And you went yesterday and then into today as well. Was that tough on you? I mean, I know you didn't go long yesterday.
Yeah, no, I mean, when Buddy took me out yesterday, he was like, hey, we're going to need you tomorrow. So, excuse me. Yeah, I was mentally ready to come in and pitch at any point in the ball game today. So
you didn't know it might be later on or anything like that?
Right, yeah, exactly. So, I just watched the game and stay locked in, and that's all you can do.
Talk about the feeling being out there for that final out.
No, that was great. I mean, to be able to get the last out, strike out in this type of atmosphere, nothing better.
All right, thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Okay, we can break down the strategy of the game, but I don't think that's really what anyone wants to do. It was odd to double switch Chuck out of the game because he's obviously one of your best offensive players, and he's gotten 7 hits in his last 10 at-bats. But And you've never seen them double switch Chuck out like that at any point during the season. But he's been hobbled a bit, I think, the last few days, more so than he has been all season, which we know he's been hobbled. And he already struggled on one play. Granted, he made one really good defensive play tonight. But the reason they did that is because they knew they needed Wade Davis to finish the 8th and go the 9th. And if they got the rally that they wanted in the 9th, at the top of the 9th, they wanted Wade Davis to close it. You get 3 runs in an inning, you can bat around with 3 runs. So they wanted to guarantee that Wade Davis would be on the hill. That's why they double switched Chuck out of the game. Kevin caught up with Charlie Blackmon and David Dahl after the game. Here are both of those two. And David Dahl, who made the rough error, looked like he almost clipped one again, but didn't clip one. I like him going into that Milwaukee series. His bat looks hot. So right back to back, barely do this, but here's Charlie Blackmon and then David Dahl.
So good to catch up with Charlie Blackmon. This moment, it's so hard for most people to be able to relate to the grind of a season, the emotions that you go up and down with. Can you just give people a little sense of what it feels like?
Baseball's really hard. You fail most of the time, and there's only a few teams that end on a win. Really, only one team that ends on a win. And it's nice to look back and realize, hey, we've played a good enough game to be in the select group that gets to make it.
The way that this group matured and progressed from the disappointment of a year ago, it really was on display tonight, wasn't it?
Absolutely. We did such a good job defensively. We threw the ball well. A few more hits would have been nice. But to see everybody contribute and really be a part of that win was awesome.
You just said it. Everyone contributes. It's happened all season long. Tony Wolters coming up with the game-winning hit. Are you kidding me?
Yeah, I'm not surprised. Everybody pulls for Tony, and he tries so hard. He's such a good player, and he made the most of his opportunity today.
Congratulations, Shap. Appreciate it.
Congrats, man. Just talk about the feeling. I mean, what a game, just all the way through.
Man, it was a great game. Both teams were battling. Pitchers were kind of dominating, honestly. Yeah, it's a great feeling. It's something we work towards. We're going to really enjoy this one tonight. Just very excited. It's what you look forward to, celebrating.
I mean, 3 games, 3 cities, 3 days. How did you guys grind through all that?
I don't know. It was tough, but, we had the adrenaline. We believed in ourselves. Freeland threw an unbelievable game on a short rest. I'm kind of lost for words right now. Still hasn't hit, but we're gonna really enjoy this one, and then we'll be ready for the Brew Crew.
All right, congrats, thanks.
Man, you guys really want this podcast. I just keep getting tweet after. My phone's broken because of how bad you want this podcast. I love it, man. This is great because this is a little passion project for me that, I just started, and I hope that you guys would follow along from my days at the 2 other places I worked, and you have. Thanks to Rock's Pile Blake Street Tavern, as always, for making this happen. Blake Street's the official watch party for Rocktober. I got that set up with the guys over at Rockies and Blake Street. I'm so happy that I could make that come together. That's the place to go if you won't be in Milwaukee like me. I just found that out. On Thursday and Friday. But man, this was awesome, and I don't like going personal on this podcast, especially on a podcast I know a lot of people are going to listen to, because I think it unveils something, and as a journalist, unveiling things can be hurtful. It's actually hurt me at times this year. But I won't lie to you, I got a million texts today. Who are you rooting for, Jake? Who are you rooting for? And I'll be honest, I was wearing a Cubs shirt and a Rockies hat because I had no idea. But I found myself rooting more and more for the Rockies as that game went along, because that team is a fun team to watch. And I'll be honest, last season, I found myself rooting for the Dodgers a lot because they were just a team that felt like you could rally around. You fall in love with a team. It doesn't necessarily carry over year to year, but I grew up a Cubs fan, a massive Cubs fan. And, as the game went further and further and the Cubs struggled, everyone in my family started leaving me alone. They went and found a different TV. It was the first time in my life I've ever not rooted for those in blue. It was weird. I mean, obviously a lot of this is professional selfishness because now I get to go to Milwaukee and go to a postseason game and work and rub elbows with really cool people and all that. But on a serious note, like, I was asked, Jake, give your perspective on what this game was like, and it was hard. You know, I wanted to see the Cubs and the Rockies both in the NLCS, and then I wouldn't have had to really come to grips with it. It would have been a great series, but wouldn't have been as direct. You know, it would have been death by paper cuts rather than, you know, one Tony Wolters paper cut. But, you know, I could not be more of a passionate Cubs fan growing up. I mean, they're why I love baseball. And I could not be more thankful and endearing to the Rockies, or endeared. Whichever one is me being thankful to them, not, you know, them, you know what I mean. To the Rockies, because they've given me so many great opportunities, and they're the reason why I have a connection with so many great people in baseball and so many great fans and so many people that think like me. Like, no matter what, if I'm, you know, covering the Tampa Bay Rays 10 years from now and I'm their broadcaster, I'll always have a soft spot in my heart for both these franchises. I always will. But I think when you're around a team, you start to root for things, and, you know, it's those stories. It's not necessarily the colors or the clothing. It's this Kyle Freeland guy is amazing what he's done. This Scott Oberg guy, I know him and I want him to succeed. You can't be a human and not start rooting for people you know are good people and that you like, you know? It's one of the cruxes of journalism, and I think it's hard to be unbiased when so much of your personal information is out there, and I like being transparent, but I'm not going to up and say that I grew up a Cubs fan today, you know, going into the game. It's a difficult balance. I mean, you hear the Chicago accent here. I'm flying to Chicago tomorrow. But I know how you feel because I did grow up a passionate fan of a team, because I'm not a robot, because I love this sport, because I love the game. And I'm telling you, as someone that is the biggest diehard Blackhawks fan in the world, and that will never change, that watching up close the Blackhawks get eliminated in 2014 by LA, I was at all those games in the Western Conference Finals. It is one of the greatest series I've ever seen played in hockey. It made it better because you got to watch something great. Because I love the sport of hockey, it superseded that love of the Blackhawks. Because I knew I watched something great. And I think and I hope that you as a Rockies fan, even if the Rockies had lost that game, you could have sat back and gone, you know, there were a couple BS things that happened to us tonight, but man, my team just played in a baseball game that is going to go down in MLB Network's next top 50 greatest games of all time. The pitching in that game, in a home run heavy era, it's the type of game that made America fall in love with baseball in the 1880s. It really is. If you can't appreciate what Kyle Freeland and John Lester did in that game, no matter what side you were on, you should not be watching this sport. So that's why I can connect and feel with you guys. Because I've been there. I've been there on all sides. I've been there on the winning side, the losing side. But I can also take the emotion away and tell you some straight up truth, or if that was bullshit. And without having that emotion, giving you straight analysis, I can tell you the Rockies won that game because they were more determined to. And baseball's not that sport 9 times out of 10. That's football. But when baseball's decided within 13 innings, kooky stuff can happen. And that was a wild game. Twists and turns of Joe Madden stalling and guys being hurt. And do they leave Freeland in? Do they take Freeland out? Why are you pinch hitting this guy? Baseball's the best because we can all look at the numbers. We can all get a grasp of something that we can gather as understanding of the sport as a whole. And honestly, the numbers that are out there for the managers aren't that much better. There's a reason why Adam Ottavino used Brooks Baseball, which you can go on. Pat Neshek does too. We can all second-guess the managers. There's no better sport for second-guessing. Look at the Broncos game yesterday. All right, should they hooked and laddered? But, I mean, really, the sport came down to why wasn't Demaryius Thomas running that route better and why didn't Case Keenum throw the ball better? And there was a million other things that happened on that play. But the Rockies game tonight with the Cubs, there were probably 25 instances where the manager had to make a direct decision with a direct positive or negative impact, and we can sit here and second guess him. And that's why baseball became so popular in the first place. Because these decisions carry so much weight. And when you play the wild card game like you did last year, and it's 8-10, the decisions don't carry as much weight. But because it was so tight, the margin for error was so small, every decision mattered. Every single pitch mattered. It was awesome. It was a thing of beauty. It's why we love baseball. I think I still have to put this in the podcast, and it won't be the last song. But a dying Cubs fan's last request by Steve Goodman. There's just a great line in there. Do they still play the Blues in Chicago when baseball season rolls around? Because he had died without ever seeing the Cubs go to the playoffs. He lived 45 years and never saw the Cubs go to the playoffs. Famous country singer. And that's the bed right now. That's Steve Goodman's song. But I want to put you on the other side too. Because you were there last year. And it's tough, and I'm not asking you to give any sympathy to the Cubs because they don't need it. They won the one World Series they needed to win, and they are playing with house money for the rest of people's lives. I know that's the way people feel because that's how my family feels. And you have not gotten there, and you want it. But there's that passion, even when you lose. And for those of you who have been there when the Rockies were winning 68 ball games a year, wasting Tulo's prime, wasting Todd Helton's prime, wasting Ubaldo Jimenez, you felt this way. And to go from there, just 2 years ago, to the high you're at tonight, going back to the NLDS for the first time in 9 years, it's important to remember why you feel that emotion. And it's because you love this game so much. And you love this team so much.
The pitch. Base hit into center field by Tony Wolters. Home comes Story. Parra to third. The Rockies have regained the lead. 2-1 in the top of the 13th. Tony Wolters with the biggest hit of his career. The Rockies have the lead.
That game will not get old for a long, long time. Call courtesy of the KOA Rockies Radio Network. Jack Corrigan, Jerry Schimmel on the call. Tony Wolters, iconic Rockies moment. Right there with Ryan Spilboards of role player doing the unexpected in a big moment. And that's just this game. That's the game of baseball. You never know who is going to come through for you like that. I'm Jake Shapiro. You can follow me on Twitter at Chapalicious. Email the show, rockyroadpodcast@gmail.com. I am headed out to Milwaukee. Literally, as soon as I finish recording this podcast, I am headed to DIA, going to Milwaukee. I've got coverage of that for you on Rock's Pile, which is going to be bad news to my friends over at Blake Street Tavern. I promised some appearances there this week, but that's not happening. That is the official watch party of Colorado Rockies baseball and the official watch party of the Rockie Road Podcast. So hope you stop by Blake Street. Say hello to my friends. where I normally do my podcast after the games. And, of course, I will be there Saturday night. Well, not Saturday, sorry. Sunday night. I'll be there Sunday night after the Rockies' home playoff game, which is at, I believe, 2 o'clock. So I'll be there around 7 o'clock after the game with either a champagne-soaked recap of the Rockies sweep, Milwaukee's, or one team's down 2-1 on the brink of elimination. Last night's pod was fun to do. I'm glad y'all were so into it. Recap that game. 2-1 Rockies, 13-inning win. Shaking my head, not even the best 13-inning Rockies playoff game. One game, do-or-die game of the last 15 years. SMH. But recapped that on the show before this, so you can find that on your RSS feed or SoundCloud, and I implore you to listen to that because it has audio that my boss at Rockspile, Kevin Henry, got from Wrigley Field of the guys celebrating: Bud Black, Kyle Freeland, Trevor Story, yada yada, the people you want to hear from. But yeah, this show is going to preview that Milwaukee series, the NLDS. Felt like I owed it to you, and the first thing I think everyone's thinking about is the starting rotation, and as well as the playoff roster. And this is fun because everyone likes to armchair GM, and I've talked about this on the show. Everyone likes tomorrow more than today in sports because the future is always brighter tomorrow than the present, which is not true with the Rockies, but nonetheless, everyone likes to armchair GM. And it just so happens that I am the master of armchair GMing. Let me give you the bona fides. I have won a lot of fantasy baseball leagues. I've been playing MLB The Show and MVP Baseball and then Triple Play Baseball before that since I was really young, and there's always been a franchise mode, and I was always making trades and stuff. And I also know a few GMs, like text them and stuff. So those are the bona fides. And I've also been at probably or watched entirely 155 Rockies games this year, not counting spring training or the playoffs. So, I know this team, man. And I know Bud Black from talking to him, and Jeff Bridich, a little less than I know Bud Black, but I know them nonetheless. So this is how I see the Rockies lining up as they go to Milwaukee. And I think you have to start with Milwaukee starting pitchers, which is a mystery on Monday. They already said they're going to have a bullpen day, and that's no fun in a way for the Rockies because they're going to have a hard time matching up their lineup. You're going to see a very, very conservative lineup, I think, from the Rockies. I mean, they have a lineup where Matt Holliday or Carlos Gonzalez is basically platooning. How about that? Two of the best corner outfielders in Rockies history platooning with each other based on the pitcher, and it changes where David Dahl plays. So you're probably going to see Dahl and Cargo in there because Cargo hits the other side better defensively, obviously, than Holliday. Or you might even see Parra in there straight up, although, you kind of want to save that guy late in the game because he is such a good bench piece. He's one of your best pinch hitters. And the pitcher is going to determine the catcher, but that's really the platoon part of the lineup. So the Rockies aren't going to be able to go full out on that. And let me give you this Brewers bullpen because it's really that good. Corey Knebel, 4-3, 3.58 ERA, had 16 saves on the year. He did not allow a run in the month of September or in the 163 with Chicago. Josh Hader was an all-star this year, one of the best left-handed relievers in baseball. He's practically unbeatable, had an 2.43 ERA. His whip was under 1, as was the next guy, Jeremy Jeffries, from the right side, ERA of 1.29. That's the guy that gets overlooked in their bullpen, Jeremy Jeffries. He is just as good as Knebel and Hader, and he is a problem. Dan Jennings pitched in 72 games, 64 innings. He had himself a 3.22 ERA. Taylor Williams is a really solid piece as well. They've got a couple other ones that I'd look out for. Corbin Burns is a younger guy that not many people know, but that's a guy that's pretty scary. And then you start getting into their front end of their bullpen. But that back end, when you look at it, 9th, 8th, 7th, 6th, and maybe even the 5th inning, you just don't want to deal with it. It's a problem. you're going to have to get to them early. And it just so happens that the Brewers have one of the worst starting rotations in baseball, and most likely the worst starting rotation still alive in the playoffs. Their starting rotation is Rockies runoff Yolis Chacin, who is 15-8 with a 3.50 ERA this year, which while that sounds good, his ERA plus was only 1.16, and he was not really that valuable of a pitcher. According to the fancy metrics, I mean, of course, that straight-up metrics say he was pretty good, but I'll tell you what, Yolis Chacin's been better than he is right now at 30. Chase Anderson's their 2-starter. You probably don't even know who that is. He's a pretty decent pitcher. Junior Guerrera, and then you've also got Brent Suter, Wade Miley, and Freddie Peralta in that rotation. Freddie Peralta is a younger guy that I like. I don't know how he'll fare in the postseason. I also like him for down the road more than I like him now. They've also got Gio Gonzalez, who has been really, really good since joining the Brewers, so I'd expect him to start. So they've already announced their Game 2 starter, which is Yolis Chacin. If you don't know who that is, he is one of the best pitchers in Rockies history. You could probably put him fourth right now behind Aaron Cook, Jeff Francis, and Ubaldo Jimenez. It's probably a tie between Chacin and Jorge De La Rosa, which just speaks to how quickly Kyle Freeland, Herman Marquez, and even John Gray is climbing up this leaderboard. So those are the Games 1 and 2 starters for the Brewers. Game 1, we don't know. Game 2 is going to be Yolis Chacin. So in that game, you're going to see Matt Holliday start because it's a right-handed pitcher. And depending on who's pitching, Herman Marquez, if he is pitching, which is a possibility on short rest, Tony Wolters always catches Yolis Chacin. Tony Wolters always catches Herman Marquez, and Yolis Chacin's a righty, so you get the left-handed catcher in there. So you've got a lot of moving parts here, and it affects the way you construct your roster. And the Rockies have already announced that Antonio Senzatella is going to start Game 1. He made his big league debut at Miller Park last year. He had not joined the rotation back when they were at Miller Park this year. He's had an up-and-down year, but the last 3 or 4 starts, Antonio Senzatella has looked like a completely different guy, the guy that we saw flash some great stuff his rookie season. His fastball has been there, and he has started to develop some off-speed stuff. And he is a guy, just like Kyle Freeland and Herman Marquez, that does not get rattled or fazed by any situation. So that's a pretty good guy to have on the mound. Of course, his high end and his talent isn't that of Kyle Freeland or Herman Marquez. But that's a pretty good guy to have going on the mound in Game 1 of this series, Antonio Senzatella. So don't expect what Herman Marquez did in L.A. or what Kyle Freeland did in Chicago, because those are extremely good pitching performances. Senzatella will give you some good length, but you are going to be hoping that your 1 day of rest bullpen, which probably Scott Oberg will be unavailable tomorrow, at least in an extended basis, because he's thrown 2 of the last 3 days going into that game, including a multi-inning performance yesterday. You're going to hope you get something from Davis, Ottavino, and O, and you're probably looking at Russin and Musgrave to provide some outs there. Hints at who I'm adding to my postseason roster. But the big decision for the Rockies is what they do Game 2. And they're leaning towards Tyler Anderson is what they're saying. But I tell you what, if they lose Game 1, which is very likely, they're out on the road. Not easy to win on the road. Although it's a bullpen game, so maybe you feel like you could get that one a bit better than the second one. Especially if you take an early lead tomorrow. Let's say you take an early lead. Craig Counsell and the Brewers are going to be more likely to use the front side of their bullpen because they're going to want to save the backside for tomorrow. Or save the backside for Friday. So, I think that you're looking at an opportunity on Monday wow, my days are all messed up. This is what happens when I travel. You're looking at an opportunity in Game 1 to get after the Brewers early and then really put a dent in them and hope that game runs away from them. But Game 2, if it does not go your way, I think you start Herman Marquez on short rest because you do not want to get swept in the playoffs and not see Herman Marquez pitch. Because the way it works right now is either Kyle Freeland or Herman Marquez is going to start Saturday or Sunday in Game 3, and there's a high chance, that if the Rockies get swept, that you don't use Germán Marquez or Kyle Freeland for even a single inning in this series because you were holding one of them for Monday. So I think you may see Germán Marquez come out on short rest, even though the Rockies have publicly said that Tyler Anderson is likely to start on Friday. And even then, Tyler Anderson, he did get rocked by the Brewers once in Milwaukee. I believe he had a decent start against Milwaukee in Colorado. But, he got really, really rocked by the Brewers in Milwaukee. And he has looked like a different guy here again the last little bit. He looks like Tyler Anderson again, as proved evident by his start in Game 162, where he was really good. And that's the guy, the Tyler Anderson, that the Rockies drafted in the first round from Oregon. So, Game 2, I think, is going to decide a lot of things in this series. Game 1 is going to decide a lot of things in this series because it's really going to decide how they play Game 2. But the way I think I would do it is I'd have Senzatella, Marquez, Freeland, then Anderson, and then I'd go back to Marquez for Game 5. Which obviously sucks for the CS round, but you got to worry about getting out of the DS first, and Milwaukee's one of the hottest teams in baseball. I know the Rockies have won 10 of their last 12, but Milwaukee's just as hot as the Rockies. I'm looking at it right now, and Milwaukee, let's see, they went 96-67 because they played 163 games too, and they finished the season on a 8-game win streak. They have not lost a baseball game since September 22nd, which was 2 Saturdays ago. So, they're hot just like you. They're playing in their home park. They've got an amazing bullpen. They are a pretty sound contact hitting team, which plays really well in the postseason. Christian Yelich almost won the batting, or he did win the batting title. They've also got Lorenzo Cain, who hit above 300, and that guy's a menace to deal with. And they got a couple guys that get on base a lot. Jesus Aguilar still gets on base. 352 is his on base percentage, which is solid, and he's a really big slugger and a hard guy to deal with. That's what scares me about the Brewers, is they've got, you look at their guys, Eric Thames, Domingo Santana hit 30 home runs last year, only 5 this year because he's only gotten 235 plate appearances because Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain pushed him out. Mike Moustakas. They've got some serious boppers. Travis Shaw. They've got guys that can change the game with one swing of the bat. And I didn't even mention Ryan Braun yet. So that's why it's scary, because they're a good contact hitting team. There's going to be traffic on the bases, and one swing can completely change the game. And that happened earlier this year in Milwaukee when they scored 3 runs in the 9th off Wade Davis, including that walk-off. I believe it was from Eric Thames. They are not a fun team to play. The one huge area, starting pitching is definitely an area of positive that goes the Rockies' way. It's not as huge as the next one I'm going to say. There's one area that's just an absolute massive positive towards the Rockies, and that is defense. On to another level, the Rockies' defense compared to the Brewers. They've got guys playing positions they have never played before until halfway through this season. Guys are playing shortstop like Jonathan Scope. Mike Moustakas is all over the place. Orlando Arcia is a really good player, and that's their one really good defensive guy. But they've got guys playing all over the place. Ryan Braun, at this point in his career, is not a good left fielder. Lorenzo Cain is a very good center fielder, and Christian Yelich is a solid right fielder. So when you look at the Rockies' infield defense, they are far superior to that of the Brewers. Albeit they probably have a better catching tandem in terms of defense than the Rockies and Kratz and Pena, and they probably have a better corner outfield situation just because of Christian Yelich compared to, Matt Holliday, which is something that's going to happen there. But the other side maxes out, Ryan or evens out with Ryan Braun versus David Dahl or Gerardo Parra, Carlos Gonzalez. But Lorenzo Cain is far better defensively than Charlie Blackmon at this point in their careers. So this is what I've got for the Rockies postseason roster. I've got Charlie Blackmon in center, batting first. DJ at second, batting second. Any way you want him down the middle, but David Dahl, Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story. And then you've got the platoon of Gerardo Parra, Carlos Gonzalez, Matt Holliday, whoever has the hot stick. You probably have Parra coming off the bench in platoon Cargo and Holliday. Ian Desmond at first, Iannetta and Wolters depending on who's pitching. So that's 11 guys right now on your who maybe could start. So you're going to want to carry all of those guys. So you have to carry 5 outfielders for a whole series. And having the benefit of only needing 4 starters will do that for you, which is Senzatella, Anderson, Freeland, and Marquez. You've got 4 for sure's in the bullpen, which is Wade Davis, Adam Ottavino, Scott Oberg, and Sangwon Oh. Then there's 2 other guys that I think are for sure's, which were on the wild card game roster, and Bud Black likes 2 lefties, so I think you're going Chris Russin and Harrison Musgrave. So that leaves your roster at 21. I've got 10 pitchers on there and 11 position players right now. So now you got to fill up your bench. And you have 4 spots to play with. And how I think the Rockies are going to do this is I think they're going to put one more guy in their bullpen, so they're going to have a 7-man bullpen, which means they're really going to have a short pitching staff because they are only going to have 11 guys on their pitching staff, which is something you don't ever really see. At least nowadays in baseball. You saw it definitely 15 years ago. But I think you see Ryan McMahon, Garrett Hampson, Drew Butera as the guys that can fill out and make that 24. I think Butera and Hampson are most likely because having a third catcher allows you to do some things. You saw that in the game last night. Garrett Hampson, pinch runner, backup middle infielder, plays all around. You'd be okay with that. And then Ryan McMahon, I think, is the one that depends on how many guys you want of each in terms of bullpen and position players. Although you would love that left-handed bat coming off the bench. You still have Gerardo Parra always off the bench, even if you are starting Carlos Gonzalez. So here are the 5 guys that I think the Rockies have to choose from. And it's either going to be one of the 5 or 2 of the 5, depending on whether or not you carry McMahon and Hampson. Pick one of McMahon and Hampson. One of them's got that spot. John Gray, Chad Bettis, 2 guys that have started most of the year, Yency Almonte, Jake McGee, and DJ Johnson. So essentially what I'm telling you is Pat Valaika is off the roster from yesterday. You have the same exact roster from yesterday, except Jake McGee and Pat Valaika are off it, and you have to fill it with some starters. And I've left you with 2 spots to choose from. McMahon, Hampson to one of them, or a pitcher. Well, like I said, you can... I'm confusing myself now. You've got McMahon and Hampson. One of them definitely makes the roster. The other one is a toss-up for 24. You can now either choose 2 pitchers or Ryan McMahon and a pitcher. And I'd like to see them go with John Gray. I don't think he should start, but I think it allows them some ability to get through the series because he can provide you both length and his plus side of throwing 100 miles an hour out of the bullpen as a 1-inning guy. He's never done it. Who knows how it's going to turn up, but it's John Gray. Your guess is as good as mine. And that talent is there. We all know that. The second guy I think is most likely, and this is crazy to be saying this, is DJ Johnson, who made the wild card roster, and he's been really good out of the bullpen for the Rockies. I mean, this guy who no one knew on September 1st has come up and been really solid for the Rockies. This year, DJ Johnson in 7 games, which has been 6 1/3 innings, has allowed 3 earned runs, 2 walks, and 9 strikeouts. That's really solid. And he's gotten better here as time's gone along. I personally would go with Yency Almonte. I like his upside. I like the big games he's pitched in. But I could see them going with Chad Bettis too. Jake McGee's already been on the postseason roster. But I think they have decisions to make that are only going to impact them if they get into another 13-inning game, or if they get into a game that goes sideways and they don't try to eat their bullpen for the next game. Because in a 5-game series, you don't have to worry about that middle series games of back-to-back-to-back-to-back like you do a 7-game series. So you can use your bullpen on back-to-back days, give them an off day. So it really doesn't hurt you too much using Adam Ottavino Thursday, Friday, because you get the off day. You can use him Saturday, you can use him Sunday, Monday if you want to. It's not out of the realm of possibilities that that's something that happens. I mean, that's something that happens in the regular season all the time. You don't prefer it, but it's something you can do. And when you're in the postseason, your back's up against the wall, guys are asked to do things that maybe they don't normally do, like Kyle Freeland yesterday pitching on 3 days rest. I picked the Rockies to win this series before the Rockies played the Cubs. I think starting pitching is still such a big thing in the postseason. Look at who was there last year. It was the teams with the 2 best starting pitching. Everyone wants to talk about bullpen, and I do believe bullpens are important. But the Rockies' bullpen has been just a tick below where the Brewers has been, and the Rockies' starting rotation is 2 or 3 ticks above the Brewers. Defense is important in the playoffs. We saw that last night. David Dahl and Drew Butera almost cost the Rockies the game. You can make the case that Tony Wolters did 2 days ago. Contact hitting is important. The Brewers got to step up there. But overall, I like where the Rockies are at headed into this series. You just have to flip one of the road games. You take care of business at home. The issue is the Coors hangover is totally affecting the Rockies right now, and I think the off day today is going to be such a huge thing for them. I think it's going to get them reset. I think they take BP. It's an optional workout today at Miller Park, but they take BP and they get their feet back under them and they start seeing things a little bit differently. So I think that's what's going to play out for the Rockies. I think that they win it in 4. I have the Rockies winning this series 3-1. And just as a reminder, the Brewers won the season series. I mean, and handedly. They won the season series. They came into Coors Field. They won a 4-game series 3-1. And then the Rockies went to Miller Park and they won the series 2-3. So they are 5-2 against the Rockies this year. But you look at the run differential, 40-31. Those games were close. There was 2 games that went to extra innings there. The Rockies' 1 win was in extra innings. The Rockies got walked off. I mean, those games were close. There was only 1 real blowout, and that was the game Tyler Anderson started in Milwaukee. So that's what I see happening in this series. I can't wait to be wrong. I'm normally wrong, except when I'm right. And I can't wait to interact with you guys from Milwaukee. I got to go catch this flight, so I'm getting off this microphone right now. And thank you guys for listening. I'm Jake Shapiro. Follow me on Twitter at Shapalicious. Email the show, rockyroadpodcast@gmail.com. Would love to see some of you guys at Miller Park, so let me know if you're out there. DM me, email me, whatever. And there will be a show after the game Thursday. Follow my Twitter. I will have a bunch of updates from Miller Park. And yeah, I'll try to do a Periscope. I'll try to do as much as I can. So I'll talk to you guys soon. It's been fun. It's been real. And it has been really fun. One big thank you before I sign off to the That's Good Sports audience. Special edition of the show, That's Good Podcasts. You can find certain shows on That's Good Podcasts on YouTube. The regular edition of the shows after every single ball game is on SoundCloud, Rockie Road on SoundCloud. It's also on iTunes, Google Play, all the good places you find podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. I will talk to you guys from Milwaukee after the game Thursday night.